Welcome to Cancer and Peace. My name is Sean Stewart, and I'm here with our host, Peter Scalzo, and we're going to have a conversation today. And you've called it control, but you put a title on there, Turning My Life and Will over to Christ's care and control. And so there's a lot in that, and I know that's one of the hardest things in recovery spaces there. So kick us off today and lead us into the deep waters here.
Okay, thanks, Sean. Yeah, I've had this on my heart and mind in the past few days, and I want to give a background as to why that is. So, as many of you know, I've been struggling, especially this past year, with my health, a lot more pain, fatigue, kidney issues, and had a couple of surgeries recently, have another one to go in early August. And so some things are surfacing right now, and one of them is that I'm not a candidate for a kidney transplant should my kidneys fail completely. And also, dialysis will be a difficult process for me. I really won't feel well. So the struggle right now is with my made-up urinary system, which is struggling. And so how they've been helping it is to install tubes, stents, that go from the kidney down to my neobladder. But the challenge is, how can we preserve the remaining kidney function that I have left? So the meeting yesterday with my surgeon was really bittersweet. It was, hey, we have X amount of kidney function left, and we'll just try to keep that going. And you can't get a kidney transplant because you're on immunotherapy. That's what's keeping the cancer at bay. But if you went for transplant, that's an immunosuppressant situation to avoid rejection. So the cancer will come right back. So because of my circumstances that I find myself in, the cancer on one hand, immunotherapy, and the failing kidney system, urinary system, I was faced with the prospect yesterday of an uncertain future, which is really part and parcel, I think, to many of us on the cancer journey. And so I was processing that. I had some quiet time yesterday, and I was processing, well, what does that mean for me? How do I live my life? How do I go day by day? How do I go moment by moment? And I happened to be reading a commentary. It's a devotional, and the author of it, Scalzo, it was out of Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, was making a point from the book of Ecclesiastes out of the Old Testament. And if you know anything, it's part of the poetic and wisdom literature of the Old Testament, written by Solomon, who the scripture says was the wisest man on earth. And I want to emphasize wisdom, rather than necessarily knowledge, but wisdom. And so in this letter that he writes, because he's really having a crisis at the time, Solomon is really questioning the meaning of life. In fact, he starts the book out by saying, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. In other words, life is meaningless. And he goes on this journey within the book to find purpose. And anyway, part through the book, he says he settles into a frame of thought, which I really wanted to focus on today, which is the fact that he says there's a purpose for everything under the sun. There's a reason for everything under the sun. And he focuses on different events in our lives. For instance, a time to be born, a time to die. And eventually Pete Scalzo takes that logic and uses it for the seasons. And I was thinking about that and relating that to my cancer journey. And I was thinking, this is how my mind works, but okay, when winter's coming, which is not a popular season for me, I'm not a real winter guy. When I was younger, I was, but not now. I have no control over the fact that season is coming upon me. And about the only thing I can do is respond to the fact that season's coming on me. And for me, that would be break out my winter clothes, make sure the shovel's in the garage, get ready to eat more soups, get ready to hunker down. And, Scazzero was using this to talk about seasons in our lives, like there is a springtime, and we have seasons in our lives: a springtime, a summer, a fall. And he was talking about how leaves fall in the fall, but they're planting seeds, and the seeds remain dormant during winter and then come out in the spring. So God is doing all this stuff, even when you feel like it's a season of coldness and difficulty. And so that concept of I don't have control over the season, let's say, of winter, but I can respond to it, is something I thought about with my cancer journey. I really don't have control over whether I survive or don't physically my cancer journey, but I can respond to it. Like this recent news, how do I respond to it? And that brought me to the concept of control, which is really something that I mentioned to Sean walking in here today, because it's really impressed upon me, is what control do I really have over my circumstances? And I'll even expand that to say over the people in my life, the places, the things, everything. What control do I really have? And for me, because of my belief in my higher power, Jesus Christ, I thought the foundation for this whole discussion for me, as far as what I'm facing in my cancer journey, is who is God, who is Jesus in my life, and God is defined in Scripture by love. God is love, right? That is one of his major characteristics, and Jesus came to earth out of love, and I thought, well, God is filled with love. That's his character. That's his essence. So even though I'm in a cancer journey, there's a loving purpose behind the whole cancer journey that I'm on now. So that's sort of the foundation, Sean, of how I was processing this kind of new news, which really gave a real depth of uncertainty as far as my physical future goes, because of my struggling kidney function. So
it's interesting you shared, like when you showed up today, we talked a bit about, the journey and there wasn't a lot of good news there. It wasn't unhopeful, but it wasn't, like you said, bittersweet, but it wasn't like there's no silver bullet out there on the horizon. It's what you really got was a one day at a time, I think.
right.
And so you've come and said, well, where do I find purpose, hope, peace, joy? I think. Is that a fair?
Yeah, and it's the foundation for me, logically and spiritually and emotionally, is that there's a purpose behind every season under the sun, and that I'm not in control. So then you started up the podcast by saying it's about turning over my life and will to my higher power, Jesus Christ, which is one of the steps in our recovery.
Yeah, I want to dive into that a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm just curious about one of the things that strikes me about what you've shared and what you shared earlier with me, and then as you're sharing this now, I don't hear hopelessness, though. That's what's interesting about, even though there's no silver bullet, there's only one day at a time. If your kidney function degrades, that's life-threatening. But there's no solution to your kidney function, because if you go dialysis, it's in competition with your immunotherapy is what I really hear.
Yeah, the kidney transplant dialysis would just be a miserable existence.
Yeah,
according to my doctor, and then fail at some point. Yeah.
Yes, and so that's why I'm saying, but you don't sound hopeless.
No.
And so somewhere in that process, because there's hope, that means you've surrendered, turned over your life and will. And that's the piece I guess let's dive in on a little bit, is like, how do you get to the point where even though the medical prognosis or even diagnosis, I guess I'm not sure the difference between the two at the moment, but the way the medical opportunities look out there for a solution are they're not encouraging, but you don't. It seems like you've surrendered your life and will to this one day at a time existence of not knowing. Is tomorrow going to be more painful, less kidney function? You and I've watched you for the last several months that you've been in pain and you've not felt well, and to go around not feeling well, to feel sick for months is just not a fun thing.
No, yeah.
But that's not hasn't been from a complaint. Like I don't see you as a complainer. Like you don't. It's not. You're not a drag to be around because you're just only in this depressed state. And it's people go through that. So I'm not trying to be. My point to that is there's something in turning over that you still are able to grasp onto, and I guess I want to explore that.
Yeah.
How does the turnover happen? And so you talked about this Devo from Pete Scalzo, and it attaches to something with these seasons, and the seasons seem to indicate that you see a higher purpose, a higher meaning, a higher something. Can you describe that in more detail? Because I think that, I guess as we're exploring this, because I wonder, like, I'm sure that there's a lot of people in a Cancer and Peace audience that are going to be saying, yeah, my medical diagnosis isn't positive either. My situation right now in a pure medical situation doesn't feel so hopeful. How do you explain what you've done? Not that you have their answer for them, but you do at least have a sense inside of yourself of peace and hope. And that's why I wanted to explore a little bit.
Yeah, I think, I'm not a stranger to having a hopeless diagnosis given. And I'll just remind the listeners, twice in my journey, 2015 and 2017, in the hospital, I was faced with Sloan Kettering, arguably one of the number one cancer centers in the United States, advising my doctor to send me home and call hospice. Medically, we had done everything that we could at that point. So those were very uncertain, hopeless from a medical perspective times. So I'm not a stranger to walking that road.
Can I add into that one? Because I think this is so you have stared at death, and you may be staring at something different this time. And so I just want to put some clarity to that. Is like what you may have heard is that, yeah, Peter, you may have years of suffering in front of you. It may not, and we don't know, whether or not you're, what your timeline is for Earth. None of us know that. And nothing about what's been diagnosed says, hey, you've got 1 year, 5 years, 10 years that wasn't given to you. And you're an anomaly already.
Right.
I think it's hard for anybody to predict how the immunotherapy, how your kidney function is going to play out. That's not a prediction that anybody's going to make. And so, but then that by definition means it could be, you may have a few years of suffering, or several years of suffering. And that's the thing I'm kind of interested in too, is like, well, hey, how do you turn your will over to that potential that this might be years of suffering in front of you?
Yeah. Just to your point, my doctor yesterday, who's one of the best in the world of what he does, said that we're in uncharted territory. He doesn't really know what the next steps are yet. And he says he's the only one in the world he knows of that can do the operations that he does on me with installing these stents and doing what he needs to do, because my system is so unique and been altered so much. And so, yes, the prospect, I think it's that the age-old question about worrying about things, about the future, right?
Yeah.
Like, yes, I could be facing some horrible suffering times. In fact, times where, and I'll just say it, where I feel so miserable that I would rather not live, really. I mean, because life is so hard, quality of life wise.
Yeah.
But that's not where I'm at right now. And I've been in those situations before where my quality of life was really difficult from a physical perspective. And I will tell you, for me personally, a tool that brings me great comfort in the really hard times, believe it or not, is the tool of gratitude. Believe it or not. That even if I'm in a hospital room, I'm struggling at home, or whatever it is, I love to make a mental list of all the ways that God has blessed me in my life. Like family I grew up in, the schooling I've had, the friends I've had, the ministries I've been a part of, the places I've traveled, the people I've loved, the 6 children that I have. I mean, the list goes on. And I sit there even in a place of pain and suffering and say, if I were to pass right now, I am a content man, because I have truly been blessed. And I think a lot of us could say that if we really objectively looked at our lives. In fact, I think people who grow up in third world countries or fourth world countries a lot of times exercise gratitude, and you're like, wow,
world
I don't know, just worse than a third world. But
we'll talk afterwards.
Yeah. There might be a place like that on Earth. But my point is that even in the worst of circumstances, I've read recently. I've read a book and had watched a show on a Holocaust survivor, and just the fact that they were able to find some meaning and purpose within that situation, that horrible situation. And of course, I'm not comparing my cancer journey to that, because in the cancer journey, even when I'm in that place of pain and suffering, I have help around me, support. But I think that the concept for me is that somehow God's not losing the battle. Like something else is intervening, whether it's whatever your beliefs are, but Satan or the brokenness or sickness of this world is winning and God's losing. I don't ascribe to that. I ascribe to the fact that God is all powerful and all knowing and all loving, and that even though the illness may be really difficult and hard and may have death as a result, that God has a purpose in that for me. And so that has come to me through pain and suffering. Is he real? Is he a reality in my life? Do I really believe that Jesus Christ, whom I can't visibly see, is real, is beside me, is guiding me, is filling me with comfort and peace, is loving on me? And can I really just say, Lord, I can't handle this. I need you to handle it, and turn it over to him. And after I'm in my 19th year now, I can emphatically say yes. And, Dr. Grasso and I were talking about, I think I'm up to like 50 surgeries with him, or procedures, and some major surgeries in there. And that's just him. And so I don't want to paint myself out as the ultimate sufferer. I just want to say that in my journey, because I thought about this today, I'm over 60, and I had 20 years of growing up, going through college, high school, all that stuff. Then 20 years as a husband and a father, right? Then 20 years as all that, but in the cancer space, just about 20. And so 1/3 of my life practically has been in this space. And there's a purpose and a reason in that.
Yes. So this piece here that you just described, I think is an important part of I'm going to call it the equation, and it's not that you or I have all the answers here, but there's something here I think that's worth digesting a little bit. Is when we in recovery talk about turning our lives and wills over to Christ's care and control, or to your higher power's care and control. I think so much of the time we think of it as a statement, but what you described is a 20-year journey of turning over the very next thing that's being asked. And so in the last few days, you've been asked to turn over something else. And you're saying, well, there's great peace when I recognize that I don't control it anyway. I think is what I hear what you saying. There's and what I think I hear you saying, and you can rephrase it because it's you, but just talking about, the journey a bit, is that while you can't physically see Jesus right now, you've had 20 years of experience of turning your will over in little steps along the way. And I think that might be the great encouragement for all of us, is that you can't in some ways turn over everything at one time. And that's not actually the ask. It's turn over what's in front of you today. And you keep releasing. And so it's a process, it's a journey. It's not a one and done and I've done it. And my own experience in recovery tells me that I turn something over and a lot of times I go run back and pick it back up. And I try to run with the ball for a while and I recognize I don't actually have the ability to carry this ball. And I have to turn it over again. And I'm sure you've done the same thing. In fact, I know you have, because I hear sometimes like that initial feeling of fear for the very next thing, and you have to release it again. It's like, hey, there's fear, and then I have to release it again. And you described some processes. One of the ways you do that is by using gratitude, which changes your perspective, not from what you don't have, but to that you do have. Your focus, and you can't focus on both at the same time. You can only focus on one of those things. And so that's a really powerful tool that you've described. But would you say that is fair, that it's been a journey of releasing Christ care to yourself to Christ care and control, and that where you were at 20 years ago is quite a bit different than where you're at today? And there's probably still room to go, but you have the ability to see this now as a season. And that season is not a season that doesn't come with the spring again. You just don't know what spring looks like.
Yeah. I mean, I think definitely what resonates with me, Sean, in that, and that was well said, was the day by day. And, it always strikes me whenever I hear about the Israelites wandering through the wilderness to get to the promised land for 40 years, and they're fed by manna that comes each morning. They have to go pick it up, and they can't hold it overnight unless it's the Sabbath because it'll rot. So they can't store it up. Each day they have to go out, get the manna, and that's their sustenance, their food for the day. And I think about that for life and for my journey. Like each day is its own unit. Like when I get up that day, it's a day by day journey, and it's sometimes a moment by moment journey that I have to seek Him for peace. I have to cling to Jesus for peace. And yes, it's a process. And yes, I have days where I take my eye off of that and where I wallow in worry and that sort of thing. But I think that life in its simple terms for me is that God is in charge of my life. Like my life is written in a book that He has recorded. And I take a lot of comfort in that things that happen to me are purposeful, meaningful. I think if I didn't have that belief, if I sort of believed in an agnostic or atheistic, however, that God wasn't intimately involved in my life, then I would be a lot more of an anxious person. I would be hammering the medical community. What do you have for me next? I would probably be soothing and numbing myself.
Yeah.
Every day I'd probably do something. Yeah. And so, yes, I think about Jesus and His willingness to put aside His desire to go to the cross, the Garden of Gethsemane when He was pressed. But there's something in that pressing, including a cancer journey, that there's something in the fact I'm not in control, I'm being pressed, I'm not happy about it. However, there's something in yielding over my will to God's. That's a beautiful, peaceful thing. Yes, I do recognize when I yield my will over to Jesus Christ, I experience peace. Yeah.
That's a powerful something that is such an important part of what you're sharing. Is like when you came in and shared, what was going on with the medical journey with me today, and when I didn't hear a medical solution, it wasn't that I was ever trying to control your journey, but there was something, there was a recognition that there was a loss of control.
Mm-hmm.
Because it seems like whenever we pray for somebody or looking for a solution, we're always hopeful that there is a stated possibility of, well, they can do this now. There's a new treatment for that, or there's a surgery, and this is, no, none of that's available. It's not all bad news. It's just, I don't have anything that says I can control it, or somebody in the medical community might be able to control this. And that stuck out to me a bit. And so this thing about releasing control, and I think this is such an important part of a faith journey, because I think what I hear you talking about is you're learning to trust God. And learning to trust God is like the deepest way, one of the deepest ways we can show love is to trust somebody around us with the most important parts of ourselves. And so we talk about it in communications, of emotional communications. The more I trust you to share my deepest pains, my deepest shame, the deepest parts of me, it's a way of showing trust, and it's also a way of showing love. And if I can do that with my spouse or friends around me, I'm loving well. And it's no different with God, even in this place. The more you're saying, hey, I recognize that there's seasons, there's going to be winter, there's going to be spring, there's going to be fall. There's all this things that are going on, and you've been asked to trust. And you're just like, I'm going to trust. And you're not just saying it, you're saying, no, I've learned to trust. I've learned on the journey to trust. And I know there are areas that I'm still hanging on to, and maybe a new leg of that got revealed in the last few days. It was like, okay, I actually need to trust here too. Trust in the pain, trust that there's a purpose for the pain, trust that, and I'll say this, there's an idea, that I heard this from Adam Young on his podcast recently, and it was just a really cool thing to think about. It's like your story, and this is any one of us, is more valuable, more interesting than any Hollywood script. Whatever movie script that you might put out there, your story, if you were actually to take time to understand it, know it, and connect with it, it's more interesting, valuable. It has so much more color, vividness, but you have to lean into that. You have to walk in that. And there's something about, you have to trust that, because inside of ourselves, when we see a Hollywood script, so much of the times I say to myself, I'm just an average guy. I don't have anything interesting like that person there. And that's a lie. And so when I look at your story, Peter Scalzo, I see an incredibly vivid, deep, rich story that is better than any Hollywood script. There's no Hollywood script that could get to the level of depth and understanding and beauty inside of your story. But that's a journey of trust that we then fit inside of God's story. And that's why I like this concept. And John Eldridge did this in a book called Epic. And it's like God's story is one epic for all of time. And then we have a story inside the epic, and your story fits in here, and it has an incredible purpose that helps connect all the epic together. Without your story in the midst of that, it would be an incomplete picture. And it's such a beautiful picture of where you're at. And what you're sharing today is this understanding that you're going through something, and it's not unimportant, and it's not without meaning, it's not without purpose. And the more you can turn your eyes and look at that and see its beauty and be grateful for all the aspects of it, you've found peace in knowing that. That's pretty cool. And you can put your own words around it, but that's what I hear you saying, I believe.
Yeah, no, I totally resonate with that. I think the concept that I like to use when I'm speaking or, wherever is the tapestry concept. I love it because I marvel at how God can weave things. I mean, because I have free will and I screw up and I make decisions wrongly at times, and there is an enemy as much as I would like to say there isn't. There is the reality is that there is an enemy, and then there's brokenness and sickness in our world and everything, and yet even with all these intervening forces and superseding forces, everything, that God is still able to weave a tapestry, a beautiful picture out of it, and that just amazes me. And so I think that God, the beauty is how God uses our pain and suffering, or whatever hardship and trial circumstances we're in. He uses it to mold and shape us and to give us more intimacy with Him. Without it, I wouldn't be the person I am without my journey. And I have a long way to go too. Like you said, it's a journey of trust.
It's a journey of trust, and it's also the serenity prayer is such a great example. Is like, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. And that is the starting point in this. There's the flip side of this, the courage to change the things I can. So this isn't saying take the hands off the wheel and close your eyes as you're driving down the highway and have courage. It's, hey, I recognize that there are things along this journey that I can't change, but I'm still going to do the things that I know that I've been called into do. You've been given a purpose and called into it. And that's why you're here doing this podcast today, is that you've been called into doing Cancer and Peace ministry, share your story with others. But the last thing I'd like to say about it is the difference, I think, between a life that is really fulfilling and deep and rich is whether you lived in fear or you lived in trust of God. And so what I see in you today as you show up here and we sat in my office and we were talking is I didn't see somebody who was living in fear. And there's reasons that you could be fearful, but you weren't living in fear.
No,
you're stepping into, hey, tomorrow is uncertain, but I'm not living out of fear. You're living out of trust. And I think that's what the ask is to kind of really look at, are you motivated by fear? So much of my life has been motivated by fear, but fear is the worst motivator that you could ever follow. And it leads to really dark and negative places and destructive behaviors. But when you can be motivated out of trust and hope, the way you've described today is like, hey, tomorrow.
I mean, I can end with this. I mean, I think there's a great reason why Jesus pulls a child over and says, hey, you got to be like one of these for the kingdom of God to be part of your life. And I think it's, as I thought about when I was a child, and there's a particular scene that I love to talk about. It's the station wagon scene.
I can already see it, but go ahead and share with everybody.
Yeah, just sitting in the back of the bench chair of a wood paneled station wagon, the old ones, and with a nice summer day with the windows down, and I'm in the back seat, and I've got my little guys, which are Army guys, and all that kind of stuff playing. My feet can't even touch the floor, and in front is this driver with longer hair blowing in the breeze, smile, and it's Jesus driving this car, right? And man, I don't know where the car came from. I don't know how it runs. I don't know anything about engines. I know we stop at the gas station once in a while. I don't know where the money comes from for all that. All I know is that he is capable, trustworthy, loving, me, and in charge. And can I just sit back and play with my little guys? Yeah. Am I able to do that? And the answer is yes, that I can, that even though my response to the news yesterday was, well, because one of my stents had become encrusted over and my kidneys struggled and I was in pain for like 3-4 big time pain, is to say, hey, I can notify you earlier when I'm having this pain because I didn't know what it was at first. I can make sure I drink plenty of fluids. Like there's practical things that I can do.
Yeah.
But man, the bottom line is I'm not driving this bus, this car.
I love that word picture you gave, and I know it's a visual. I actually have a visual in my own mind. However, I am I'm thinking about getting some vinyl that looks like wood panel. I'm going to put it on the side of your taco just so that you can be reminded every time you get into the taco. It's like there it is. The wood panel truck that.
And a lot of times people comment. I like to make fun, whether I'm in hospital set, wherever I am, jokes and pleasantness and stuff. And why not? I mean, I'm not driving the car.
Yeah.
I can sit in the back. I can make jokes. I can have fun playing.
Yeah.
Things may hurt at times.
Yeah.
But I'm not in charge.
That's such a great picture.
Yeah. So I think I love the parent-child relationship that God created for that, because we really, your 2 grandkids or 3, how many? 3 grandkids, my 1, they're totally dependent on their parents, right?
They are. And they're not thinking about the roof over their head or the next meal. They just know, hey, I'm dependent on that person there. Yeah. And they're not worried about that person there. They know that person loves them, mom and dad or grandparents. Such a great picture. And I think that's how God feels about each of us. He has our best in mind. And so I hope everybody kind of just connected, just being able to feel that picture. But our topic today was really just turning your life and will. And so you've shared a lot about your life and just even the recent weeks about turning over your will, but it's a process, it's a journey. Don't beat yourself up if you don't feel like you've turned over enough. It's like today, take time to, hey, are you feeling fearful? And you could use some of the tools that Peter shares, like, but do you have the ability to stop and just look at the other side? What can you be grateful for? And then maybe just an act of surrender, maybe just opening your hands and say, whatever this is that you're feeling, can you surrender that today and trust God with that one item, whatever it is? And it's a journey down that road. And so our hope is that you find great peace in this journey. And if you want to see more resources from Cancer and Peace, go to cancerandpeace.com. You can see Peter's book, and there's resources, some of the stuff that we refer to in the podcast here we put out there. So check it out. And thanks a bunch for listening.
Thank you. Blessings.